What is up, investors? Back again. Time to look at another stock, and today it is going to be GoPro. By request, ticker symbol GPRO. This is a favorite of retail investors. As we've seen, actually, over the last couple months, retail investors have just been absolutely killing these hedge fund guys. And we see this divergence here where these stocks really went up a lot. And one of the stocks is actually GoPro. If you dig into this data, there's a lot of like speculative companies that people have been betting on, like Hertz and the airlines and the cruise lines, but also GoPro in here. But we see this divergence kind of coming back to, not that the hedge fund guys are that much smarter than everybody else, but you rarely see, look at this. You rarely see this kind of divergence where the retail guy is absolutely killing the hedge fund. This is going to come shrinking back, and that's because people are playing around with these stocks, these penny stocks. Now, I'm not saying that you can't invest in GoPro, but look, if you held this stock for the long term, even if you bought back up in here before like the kind of craziness when it just IPO'd, this stock has been on an absolute flat line for like 4 years. So you wouldn't have made any money. You would have missed all the money you could have made in Amazon and Apple and Netflix and all these other companies that have, and Tesla and any other company that has gone up through the roof over the last 4 years. But if you take a look like at just a yearly chart, it is down, but you've had these moves. You could have bought this stock at the $2 level and it has rallied up hard closer to obviously the $5 level. We're kind of not quite in the middle of a 52-week range, but again, that low is $2, which is quite a valuation hit. So the valuation we've got now is 600 million. So this got down to a call it a sub or around $300 million valuation, and it ticked all the way up to about $6. We're right in the middle of this range, and there is, if you stretch this out a little bit more, there's a lot of just kind of demand and trading, churning of this stock right at the $5 level, especially the last, call it 2 years. The stock has consistently hit its head on that call it $6 level, and is just continually to get beaten down. So in that case, when you're analyzing GoPro, that's how you want to analyze this company. Unless you have this grand vision that GoPro is going to come out with products that no one's ever seen before, and all of a sudden start making tons of money. And when we jump into the financials, we'll see if there's any evidence of that. Let's first take a look kind of at this annual. We've got 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I love these big, broad views. You can kind of get and see kind of what happened to GoPro. This takes us all the way back into the year 2015 when this stock was still at like 15, 18 bucks. It had sold off tremendously from its highs of about, 50, 60, $70. But we see here the company was actually making money. Here's our net income line right here. This company was actually making money in 2015, and their margins were nice at 41%. That's like Apple type margins. And we've seen that those margins have steadily been chipped away. Now they ticked up in the last year. That's kind of nice. But what's also been chipped away is the profit. They lost a ton of money in 16, lost a lot of money in 17, lost more here. We call it almost break even back in 2019. But what also has stalled out, and this is probably what's killing the stock even more than this profit line, are these revenues. Look, we went from 1.6 billion down to 1.1, 1.1, 1.1, call it 1.2. So this company, their revenue line looks exactly like their stock chart. It has just been on an absolute flat line. So if you have faith that GoPro is going to turn it around, you need to see this revenue get back up into this 1.6 range and then trend even higher than that, get up to 1.7, 2 billion. Then, look at this. This is a company that's valued at $668 million, and they've got, sales of, over $1 billion. So that's, you're not even paying one-time sales, but this is not a company that's making money. Let's jump into the most recent quarter. Okay, so that kind of gives us a broad view. Let's see if there's any evidence that things are turning around for GoPro on a quarterly basis. We see 3 months ended here, March 31st. Obviously, we know in March 31st, we have COVID-19. So we know there's quite a bit of that impact going into this stock. And so you can give them a little bit of leeway thinking, maybe people cut back on their purchase of action cameras and they weren't maybe going out at all and filming themselves or whatever it is. So you did see quite a revenue decline here. In 19, they were at call it 243, and we ticked down to about $120 million. If you annualize this out, you're not even getting anywhere close to $1 billion in revenue again. So that's a problem. Now, gross margins don't have the percentage on here, but this doesn't appear to be that great of a margin. It's not like it's ticking up any significant amount of degree, but we had a gross profit about 38 million, which is not too uncommon with these kind of manufacturing companies, consumer electronic companies. This isn't Adobe or Microsoft or Google or Apple, or, Apple is consumer electronics, but their margins tend to be a little bit higher. They've got that service revenue kicking in there. Now, the problem with GoPro is not necessarily kind of this gross profit number. It's these operating expenses. It's getting chewed up in R&D, sales and marketing, general and administrative. So now what we saw here, what I wanted to point out here is notice that sales have flatlined essentially over the last 3 years, but notice that this net income has actually been improving. So where are they driving efficiencies? They're cutting cost. So they're actually cutting their workforce. This is back in April. They cut workforce by 20% or more back in April. And I think they've probably done some other things like that over the years. So we see that research and marketing dropped by about 5 million. Sales and marketing dropped by about 4 million. General administrative, unfortunately, ticked up about 3 million. So they're still paying kind of the corporate heads over in this space. So that gets us to an operating loss of 56 million. That's nearly a triple over the previous period of a $20 million loss. So I don't think any of you guys are out there buying companies because they're generating a better net income figure by firing people. That's literally how GoPro is generating better financials on the bottom line, is by firing people. Okay, that to me is not a long-term solution for GoPro. Long-term solution for GoPro is introduce some new products, enter some new markets, generate some new revenue. So we have a net loss here of 63 million. That compares to 24 the period before. That is absolutely a disaster. How long can they survive this? We'll take a look. We went from 150 cash down to 117. You can throw these marketable securities in there. They've got about, we'll just call it $125 million in cash. Now, when you lose 60 million in a quarter, that 125 million in cash can go down quite a bit. Now, they do have some receivables and they have some inventory and stuff like that. How did inventory, especially in a COVID-19, inventory ticked up quite a bit? So what that's going to tell me is those margins are probably not going to improve the rest of the year, because GoPro is going to have to churn through the inventory. We see Save Big with Hero 8 Black bundle up here. So they're going to bundle some things up and try to, squeak some margin out that way, but they're going to have to put things on sale. They're going to have to, figure out a way to move through this inventory, since it ticked up nicely in the quarter when they probably were not anticipating it. Now, does this company have some debt? Absolutely. We've got some long-term debt here at 151 million. That ticked up a little bit. We've got some short-term debt. This is due pretty soon. That is 30 million. Okay, that's not great, because when you only got 125 million and you got 30 million due here really soon, you got this accounts payable. Oh man, this is not looking good. This is why when you're a Main Street guy, look, I understand some of you guys get lucky on these stocks. You bought them down at 2 and the stocks run up. This is the kind of investment that I don't mind you taking some profits, because this is a company that from a fundamental financial perspective absolutely looks like a disaster. Go look at my videos on Adobe and Netflix and Microsoft, especially, and Apple. Even like something like Tesla, or even like some of these other high flyers like Beyond Meat. They're not nearly as financially distressed as this company. So look, I don't mind if you're going to buy these stocks when they bottom out, but you got to know when to take a profit, because a stock like GoPro, if the market continues to trend down like we saw last week, GoPro's going to go right with it. GoPro's not, it'll head right back down to retest this $2 and $3 level. just like it has over the last few years. And again, looking at this chart is an absolute disaster. Rarely do you see charts like this rebound. Once the chart goes flatline, it's like somebody in a hospital that goes flatline. The odds of them being revived and living a normal life are low. And I think the same analogy, it's kind of a grim analogy. I apologize about that. But the same analogy I think can apply to companies. Once you see, these high flying stocks go flatline, it's going to be really, really hard for them to bounce back. I think your only upside in a stock like this is if somebody buys them. So somebody makes like a $6 or $7 or $8 a share bid. But in that case, you're capping your upside. So your downside in this stock is like $2 or less, because this is a company that could easily go bankrupt if the market and the economy stays bad and people aren't buying these GoPros and sales tick down the way that they did. Look, I mean, sales went from 242 down to 119. That's a $50 million knock off, more like $30 million. But if you knock another $20 million off that, all of a sudden now you're under $100 million worth of sales in a quarter, and you owe the bank a cool chunk of change. And so this is just not a stock that I would touch for the long term. But again, if you want to be risky and you want to play the risk game, I don't mind anybody trying to jump in here and maybe buying low and selling high, but just make sure you're doing that. This company has consistently hit its head in this $5 range. That's not a place where I'd be looking to buy it. So hopefully that helps you out with GoPro. And if you're not interested in GoPro, just whenever you see a stock chart like this, in my opinion, 99% of the time for me, it's a no touch unless you're playing some kind of short-term trade, because very rarely, and if you have a company that has an example of having a huge IPO pop, going flatline for 5 years, and then all of a sudden going all the way back up and making new highs, leave me a comment down below. I'd love to take a look at a stock like that. But in my opinion, those stocks are few and far between. So if you're a long-term investor, I'd avoid GoPro. If you're a short-term speculator, GoPro might be something you can add to the watch list, but I think we're at the top of a range. So I'd wait for it to pull back quite a bit. You'd get it even at a even better valuation than you're getting now. So hopefully that wraps it up. Leave me a comment below if you have a stock you'd like for me to cover on the channel. Hit that like button if you made it all the way through. Man, that'd really help. And maybe consider subscribing to the channel. I'll be coming back again this week with lots more videos analyzing stocks. So thanks for tuning in. Good luck with your investments.